The Gulf states host the most advanced American military hardware on Earth. THAAD, Patriot, the Fifth Fleet, Al-Dhafra, Al-Udeid. Decades of protection, American soldiers, economies built on one guarantee. America had their back.
February 28, 2026. Those systems fired for weeks. Not to protect the Gulf, to clean up a war their partners started without asking them.
UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, countries that fired no shots, lost $120 billion from their stock markets alone. The protection guarantee had become the targeting coordinates. By the end of this explainer, you'll understand why the Gulf's most important decision isn't rebuilding what Iran destroyed, it's whether to keep trusting the partner that burned it down. This is Voice on Pages.
All right, let's get right into the true cost and the three pillars of this situation. You see, this isn't just a war story. It's a story about treating allies as logistics and then handing them the invoice. An invoice with massive stakes, impacting 9 million Indians across the Gulf, $50 billion in remittances, and 50% of India's crude flowing through a strait that Iran completely closed. So to really grasp this, the story comes down to three things: the price, the betrayal, and the pivot. Let's start with the price.
Think of the American security umbrella, kind of like the world's most expensive car alarm. Imagine your neighbor crashes a truck right into your house. The alarm fires for 6 straight weeks, keeping everyone awake and shattering your windows. And when the dust finally settles, you're the one left paying the bill.
The clinical data behind this is pretty staggering. In just the first month alone, the UAE lost roughly $6 billion, with their aviation and tourism sectors completely devastated. Emirates Airlines was slashed to 75% capacity, and Dubai International actually had to suspend flights after a drone hit a nearby fuel depot. Saudi Arabia took a hit exceeding $10 billion. But take Qatar, for instance. 17% of their annual LNG capacity was completely destroyed at Ras Laffan. We're talking about an estimated $20 billion in lost annual revenue for the next 3 to 5 years. Goldman Sachs is even projecting that Qatar and Kuwait could see a GDP contraction of up to 14%.
Let that sink in for a second. Across the Gulf, the tourism sector alone is hemorrhaging $600 million every single day. And when you zoom out to the macroeconomic level, the United Nations Development Program estimates a staggering $120 to $194 billion was wiped from Arab GDP in just the first month of this conflict, which brings us right to our second pillar, the betrayal. Okay, imagine you hire a security guard to watch your property. One night, out of nowhere, that guard starts a massive fight with a rival gang without telling you. Your windows get smashed in the crossfire, and the next morning, the guard just offers to sell you a better lock.
The Gulf states didn't start this war, and they certainly didn't ask for it. But consider the early days of the conflict. Iran immediately targeted the American footprint. Al-Dhafra Air Base in the UAE was struck. Missiles hit Al-Udeid in Qatar. The Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was targeted. The ultimate security guarantee literally became the target list, and Washington gave the Gulf capitals zero warning before initiating the strikes that triggered the whole thing.
And this wasn't just some reactive scrambling. UAE diplomatic advisor Anwar Gargash confirmed these Iranian attacks were severe, deliberate, and calculated. They had been planned for years, right in the middle of ongoing UAE-Iran normalization efforts. Companies like Qatar Energy had to declare force majeure at damaged facilities. The Gulf was simply caught in the crossfire of an unasked-for war. Which brings us to the third pillar, the pivot.
Going back to our analogy, if your security guard burns your house down, you definitely don't renew his contract. You build your own alarm system, and you start talking directly to your neighbors. We are already seeing this massive, structural pivot taking place. On May 1, 2026, the UAE officially left OPEC, ending 59 years of membership. Their new target? Pumping 5 million barrels per day by 2027, backed by a massive $150 billion investment. UAE officials are now openly describing a go-it-alone posture, aggressively moving towards strategic autonomy for their economic lifelines.
But here's the thing. We're witnessing an incredible paradox playing out in real time. On one side, the U.S. fast-tracked $16.5 billion in emergency arms sales to the UAE, Kuwait, and Jordan, sending more THAAD radars, counter-drone systems, and AMRAAM missiles. Essentially, America started the fire and then immediately sold them the fire extinguishers. But on the flip side, the GCC is actively building the Gulf Missile Dome, an integrated defense architecture designed specifically so it does not require U.S. activation to defend their skies.
So what does this mean for you?
Let's break down the real-world stakes here.
Let's look at the human toll, specifically for India. There are 4.3 million Indian nationals living in the UAE alone, and 9 million across the wider Gulf. They build the infrastructure, they run the hospitals, they drive the service sectors. In the crossfire of this war, at least 7 Indian nationals were killed by missile debris, and thousands more have been sent home jobless as the regional economy contracted.
And get this, the economic exposure is absolutely massive. The Gulf region is responsible for roughly $50 billion in remittances to India every single year. That's 38% of India's total remittance lifeline, suddenly placed at severe risk because of a conflict they had absolutely no part in.
And then there's energy security. Historically, 50% of India's crude oil imports transit right through the Strait of Hormuz. With Iran effectively closing that strait during the conflict, a neutral India had to scramble, frantically diversifying its oil sourcing across 40 different nations. If the Gulf rebuilds its security architecture entirely away from the U.S. umbrella, where exactly does India's economic and energy lifeline land?
But here's what most people miss. Consider who actually filled the diplomatic vacuum. It wasn't Washington. China deployed a special envoy to the region in a matter of days, helped broker the ceasefire, and really emerged as the one global power not viewed as an aggressor. The UAE's exit from OPEC just accelerated this strategic autonomy by a decade, and Beijing is right there to deepen those structural ties.
Okay, so that brings us to the final invoice. As we look at the aftermath, we're really staring at 3 potential scenarios. A managed reset on Gulf terms where U.S. leverage fades, a complete architecture shift where the Gulf Missile Dome accelerates and China deepens its foothold, or total regional sovereignty, where the Gulf normalizes with Iran and builds a new order independent of superpower approval. Now, the Gulf can afford to wait and choose. Their sovereign wealth funds hold a combined $5 trillion buffer. They literally kept investing while the missiles were flying. But the strategic calculation? That has permanently shifted. Consider this historical parallel. The 1991 Gulf War cost Arab nations about $620 billion. But back in 1991, the Gulf actually asked America to come. In 2026, with an initial economic hit of over $120 billion and counting, they didn't.
The Gulf spent 80 years buying American protection. One unasked-for war, $120 billion and counting. Does America still get to send the invoice? Drop your prediction. Gulf on new terms with America, or is this the moment the pivot became permanent?